Hello everyone, I am Jonathan, also known as the Medieval Genie, and today we're going to be looking at some sparring footage, and I'll be talking about just what I did right, what I did wrong, the tactics and why things are working out the way they are, and some things you may be noticing but aren't quite sure why, and maybe things you might not have noticed. And we'll just go through the footage and I'll break down certain parts, maybe pause and go back a little bit and talk more about it. So let's get started. So here we are, I'll switch back to here. So, salute, we get ready. It should be noted that, let's go back a bit. There you go, I can see us both. I'm the one on the left, of course, you've seen my face already. And this guy on the right is Joe. He is someone who's had some experience in certain martial arts and things, but not so much in military sabre, which is the style we're doing there. At the time we had foams because he doesn't have the full protective gear, but that's fine. It still gives, even if not the same weight and feel of a real sabre, you can still do the techniques, and it's a good sort of, I'd say, introductory weapon. And even as someone who does tournaments with full steel swords, I find that the foam ones are good to have a sort of a play about without having to pad yourself out like the Michelin tyres, man. Another thing to notice, he's left-handed. This will make a significant difference to the play during the whole sparring session because it changes the way in which you fight. So if I go back to myself for a minute, so here I am with a military sabre. I, like a majority of the population, am right-handed with a sword. Funny enough, left-handed on a computer. But that means if I'm doing something like an outside guard, I'm doing here, inside guard here. So it's this sort of general setup. So if I'm just in a normal relaxed position, I'm usually with my sword on my dominant side, which is of course the right. If I'm doing a cut, normally people cut down from above rather than up from below, and they more frequently cut from their dominant side inwards rather than from their non-dominant side outwards. Now you can imagine, if I'm cutting in the normal, typical fashion, then as a right-handed person, the sword comes from this angle, and normally a right-handed person parries this cut with an inside guard, which is this. So the blade is coming from that way, and if you had a sword and were pointing at your screen now, you'll find that the way to parry my imaginary attack is that you take your sword to the inside guard if you're right-handed. If you're left-handed, instead, that attack is parried with an outside guard. And this is what's happening between him and me. As he does his dominant side attacks, which, like I said, are more frequent just naturally by how people work, as he's attacking from his dominant side, that means that my parry, you can even see it as reflected in the camera, attacks from this direction are parried at this angle. So when I'm in the outside guard, it's parrying his dominant side attack, as opposed to I'm naturally in this outside guard just when I'm not doing anything, and someone attacks from this angle, I have to change to an inside guard to parry that. So this is the default sort of normal resting position I have by default, without doing anything, parries his dominant side attack. This initially might seem useful, but it means that, of course, he's going to pick up on that very quickly because it's my resting position. It's not something that catches him by surprise. So as the fight progresses, he is adapting to that and trying to catch me at unusual angles as the fight goes on. So if we head back to the sparring footage, here he is. Initially, you can see there, I've just about missed his torso. I was out of range. He's attacked my dominant side again. I'm trying to attack from his non-dominant side, which means I have to go from my left unless he moves his hand out. That was a double, of course. Bit crap exchange. If you're wondering, by the way, my t-shirt has a submachine gun on it, and it says, Uzi does it. There we are, tried to parry your post. Didn't work. That is a hanging guard. It's another part of, bearing in mind, I'm strongly influenced by British military sabre. So you'll see that come into play a lot during the session. You can see I've got my dominant foot forward, non-dominant foot back most of the time. And I'm doing sort of shuffle footwork, which is very much like you might see in sport fencing or in British military sabre. Bearing in mind, sport fencing does derive from things like épée, sabre and those things. Double again. Let's go back to that exchange. Yeah, so he's doing these spins. I do that kind of stuff a lot, as people might have noticed if they watch my other videos. So I try to catch him, because in the middle of a spin, this is something I know, when you're doing these motions, for the most part, you're vulnerable. It takes some time to kind of recover, which is why I only ever do those spins. You'll see me do it later. I only ever do it in this sort of sparring or a fight or whatever if I'm out of range and I know I'm safe to just play about and be silly. Whereas here, I take the initiative. Unfortunately, he regained his structure and struck me on the head. So I was partially right, but I was mostly wrong. I thought that not only would he not defend himself properly, which was correct, I struck him. I think I caught his arm and slipped down. Let's try again. Yeah, here we are. Just a little spin. Ooh, look at me! And whack! But I think he had his arm around here, recovered, and then just bore down on my head. I would have come out worse in that exchange. I caught him with a moderate cut on the arm, whereas he caught me with a strong cut on my shoulder. Now that was a more tentative attack, because I don't want to repeat my mistakes. I know I'm going to attack the torso from here. Probably around the hips. He might strike me on the head from this. You can see his sword is up high. He has the opportunity to just do a turn of the wrist and cut down if I don't parry or escape in time. I am clearly not even just on the preparation, but actually in the middle of throwing an attack. Let's see how this comes out. Yep. And I got out just in time. I'll show that again. Whack! And he swung down, which is fair enough. Very dangerous action I did there, but it just about pulled off in a very crude fashion. Yes, if I can, I go for certain wrist and forearm cuts, as I call hand carving. Did a video on it recently, but it's a more convenient target than charging in for the head or chest. And that was an interesting one. That was a hanging parry. There was one there as well. But this one, see if I can pause at the right moment. So I'm trying to make myself look vulnerable. Didn't work. I just let him. Here, he will do a cut one, a normal, just like I mentioned earlier, a dominant side attack. It will land. He's aiming for around my head or shoulders, which is fair enough. I have raised the hilt of my sword and dropped the point. Didn't do it very well. It can be done on either side, and this is a hanging parry. So if I go back to camera. So a hanging parry would be, just like I mentioned, this is the hanging guard. A parry, I'm either doing this, which is cuts coming in from this side, or even thrusts if I sort of scrape it aside. Let's say someone thrusts to stab me in the neck. I could go scoop, so I catch the sword, and then I can bear down for a post. In his version, because, like I said, his dominant side attacks to my dominant side, what instead happened was I think I started an outside guard, sloping up for a parry, which should look more like this. I was a little bit point high. So notice my hand is raised slightly above my head, So the basket is there. So you've got this protection from my head downwards. Sometimes when people do it, they lower their hands a bit too much, and in which case there's a line here where you can cut or thrust around to the head. But I went from here, and then that just naturally lends itself to riposting, because if you kind of, because you don't want to break your wrist and kind of twist yourself holding it in a hammer fist, you kind of relax your hand and open it up a bit. And then I have to do this without hitting my light fixture up above, but if you just tighten the grip or sort of close your fist, it naturally does that, and that's halfway to the cut. And then I just need to add a little bit of a do that, and it just turns into, I actually had to stop myself a little bit so I didn't hit the camera. So that's the way that parry riposte goes. But like I said, if someone does a cut or a thrust, instead of parrying upright like this sort of thing, you know, a stab or a cut, you parry upright like that or like that. You just simply, you have it the other way up. So instead of hilt, tip, it's hilt, tip, or hilt, tip. But it's very easy, and it also provides a stronger action. I find if I do upright action, it's quicker. So it would be something like parry riposte. Whereas with the sloping defense, it's more like parry riposte. So we'll see that I do a cut and it bears down in a stronger fashion. Let's get that done now. So whack. I actually tried to aim for the legs and missed. So I'll just try it one more time. So we've got all this. Parry, riposte. If I'd aimed for the torso, I would have actually hit. Foolish of me to aim down there. Yeah, see, I do a spin, but I'm out of measure. I'm trying to exploit his weakness when he spins, but he's not as vulnerable as I thought he is. Well done, Joe. Try a thrust. He dodges out of measure. Pointless exchange. That was thinking maybe... Ah, there we are. Nope. I'm trying to look for vulnerabilities. Trying to test him. Best way to do sort of feints... What? That was a failed sloping parry. He did very well there, so we'll shut out again. We're testing each other's defences. He's coming up here into what's kind of like a Guard of St. George. And clearly, because I'm parrying on the inside, sort of binding the sword, I'm vulnerable on my right because I've parried to my left. Excuse me, and I'm vulnerable from head to toe on that side. So he goes for it. I think, I will react with a sloping parry, just like I did before, and riposte. I was not in time, and you can see the tip of the sword is way up here, so I'm completely vulnerable. He strikes in a vulnerable area, and I didn't even make an afterblow, you know, a cut after I was hit. So he won clearly in that moment. There, I'm trying to go for his wrist, which is vulnerable, but he moved out of the way in time. Worth a shot though, because it was a free... There we go! That was a proper sloping parry and riposte. I'll show that again, because I love it. So, I pretend to be vulnerable. Now I'm into... There we are! Parry, riposte! He didn't withdraw his leg. And this is why we are encouraged to do shuffle footwork. Notice with my footwork, I'm usually extending out my right leg, because it's my dominant leg, is forward, and my left leg is either matched up like it is there, or is behind. This is important in this particular exchange, because if we look at his legs, so all of this is happening, so I'm doing the same footwork, he's done a little bit of a kind of a passing step. Now I'm mentioning this because watch. Because of him sort of doing that kind of footwork, he's ended up... I was able to catch his right leg. Now, because he's left-handed, his dominant leg is his left, which should be in front, and he could just close it up and either attempt to parry or dodge. But because he kind of ended up off-footing, admittedly also helped by the stage being a bit close, I was able to strike his leg and take advantage. Actually, no, it seemed it caught the trousers, but that was dangerously close at least. Oh, pun by me. No. You can see him parrying. Yeah, there we are. Sometimes I'm doing a bit more like a medium guard, which is hilt to the middle, or inside guard to left, because if I just hold myself out here and an outside guard, he's less tempted to attack on my right, because he can see right in this position now, I'm parrying it. If he attacks, woof, nothing happens. But I want to encourage him to do that, so you can see there, he attacked from his right instead, to try and exploit my weak side. Didn't do much because it was just as a sword beat, but it's still influencing the way he behaves. I missed with a leg riposte again. I was clearly going for the leg too often. But there, he's tried to beat the sword aside, coming from his right instead of his left. I recover easily. Hanging guard. He's binding up, testing my defences and pressure. I knew as soon as he let go that he was moving into something. He attacks from his dominant side because I exposed temporarily my right. Parry on the right in the hanging defence, like I mentioned. And you can see I'm just about ready to do a lunge, extend the leg, and try to cut. He does jump out of the way in time, though. Whoosh! That was a very slow riposte by me. That's what I mean by out of measure. When you swing and you're not only going to hit the air. Trying to catch areas like the wrist and the hands. But of course with the basket hilt guard, it's very difficult for me to do my usual hand carving of opportunity. It's not impossible. I did some bad footwork there, but I did a cut. Let me have a look at what happened there. There, I'm trying to cut upwards at the wrist. He lowered his hand. So that was neutral. He's done a dominant side, little testing cut, not much commitment, that's just fair enough. He doesn't want to overextend himself too much. You can see what's happening there. He's bracing probably for some sort of cut from sort of whirling around downwards at my head maybe, or something like that. I can immediately see his arms out. Juicy hands and arms. Cut! Oh, I actually caught his... Oh no, instead of bearing down, he sort of swayed outwards, just sort of did a cut from in, swish out. Doing more of a cut from the arm rather than a cut from the wrist. Camera time. This might be getting a bit of a repeat gag. So when I talk about cuts from the... use my hatchet because it takes up less room. So cut from the whole arm, whoosh, powerful. But you can see it a lot. You can see all of this. So I'm telling the opponent what I'm doing more. Additionally, it tends to be slower. So it's more powerful, so if someone's doing a weak and badly structured defense, I can bear through it. Or if I want to do a beat and take the opponent's sword aside and follow up, then this sort of full arm action puts more power into clearing away. I don't care what you've got. A parry, a sword that's just doing nothing, whoosh, I attack very strongly and this clears it away for me to do what I like. Strong people tend to do this more frequently because of course the sword or whatever other weapon is less strenuous to them, so they can do more of these full body actions with less fatigue. People like myself who are quite weak and feeble tend to rely more on wrist action. So instead I'm just doing more like this. You can see I'm still moving my arms, but it's more like an adaptation because I don't want to kind of break my wrist. I'm just sort of adapting to what's going on, just allowing free movement, just how the body works. But the actual power and the speed is coming pretty much entirely from the wrist. So I'm doing that sort of thing, or that. There are many different angles of attack, but it's quicker, but it's weaker. And rather than trying to power through people's defences, it's more like they'll have a defence. Let's say this covers my upper right, so you can attack lower right, upper left, lower left. So I'd instead be trying to go, okay, cut from in those unprotected areas. So basically, rather than trying to go through somebody's defence, I just avoid it altogether. So it's a contrast between our styles. He's trying to power his way through what I'm trying to put up, because he works in much more physical labour, so he's got a strength advantage over me. Yeah, what I did. I stumbled a bit. So you'll see more of his actions are full arm cuts, which, if I don't structure my defence properly, means he will cut entirely through. And you'll see I might look like I'm posturing when I'm doing a... Sorry, there's a moth in my room. When I look like I'm doing a lot of posturing and posing, I'm actually trying to produce a good structure. Like here... Yeah, he caught me. But when I'm doing things like that sort of outside guard here, it looks fancy, and I know people might think it's pretentious, but this is to produce a good body structure. So if someone hits really hard, it probably won't go through, unless obviously they're hitting somewhere that's not protected. But that's just basic logic. There, I tried a full arm cut. It didn't quite work, it seems. We both hit each other in the hands or wrist area. This is half swording. It's medieval style, not really sabre style, but I was just trying to experiment on him. Try a little bit of experimental stuff just to see if I can get different reaction from opponents. Wasn't really doing anything useful. Lower the sword, not only to rest for a bit, but also to make myself look vulnerable. Actually, it's a worthwhile moment. There was a neutral exchange, but you can see, actually, I didn't structure defense properly. He was out of range and didn't hit me, but he easily beat the sword aside. So we've done all that, la la. Here. Actually, no, never mind. I've got good structure, so I didn't position a sword correctly, but I still managed to absorb the force. It also helps that he hit close to the hand, which is stronger. Yeah, I thought I was going to carry him off to my left and then cut, but his thrust reached my torso before I was able to take it all the way out. So he just stabbed me in the left of my torso instead of the centre. Hand hit, well done to him. Playing of each other's range. There we go. When he attacked me, he actually closed the distance, which gave me more space to riposte. We show that again. That's the hand cut. Well done him. So, watch the measure. Measure, by that I mean how close me and him are. This is a good distance. If we did a lunge or something, you know, like sort of stepped forward, we can hit each other, but we're out of measure. You know, we can't hit each other until then. But then, he closes distance. I go back. We're matching distance, but then suddenly, where's the moment? Here. He lunges. I also lunge to riposte. Wham! Shin hit. So closing a distance more left him more vulnerable. Yeah. I think he was overcommitting to lunges. Just spreading his legs out to jump so far and try and reach me from further away. But Yeah, I'd sparred him earlier that session with two-handed swords, and because it's a medieval style with in two hands, I was hitting his hands and forearms very frequently. Whereas with sabres, against the same person and being the same opponent against him, I was I was hitting his hands a lot more frequently, whereas now I'm hitting his lower torso and legs more. If I'm tapping a body part, it just means I'm accepting, I've been hit there. It's good to tell your opponents where they've struck rather than making them hit you harder and harder until you scream to acknowledge, yes, I have been hit there. Better just say, yeah, tap tap, you got me on the shoulder, or tap tap, got my leg. Okay. Since this is not a real fight to the death. Tried to expose my elbow as a pretend, but it didn't work. He didn't fall for it. Playing with measure, nothing really happens. Grab the sword! Ha ha! Now, people might think that grabbing a sharp sword is a bad idea. People have seen test cutting, well, some of you, one or two of you, may have seen test cutting footage, so you should know this sword is fully sharpened. It's not the sharpest sword I've got. With the way cutting works, if you had a chop going on, that will cut. If you have a slice going on, that will cut. But you can see now, this is live, this is real, it's a sharp sword. There's a piece of paper. There's one there. It cuts. I've just wasted some paperwork, but oh well. So this is a sharp sword. I can feel it digging into my skin, but again, I'm not dragging it, and I'm not chopping with it. So you can see temporarily the marks on my hands. This is proof. I have grabbed a real sharp sword, but yet I have not been cut in the flesh. Because if you grab the sword, yes, there is a worry that while you're doing this, I'll be careful now because it might drag, but while you're doing this, if the opponent tries to pull away and slices their way out, that's going to be bad for your hands. But if you catch them off guard, grab the sword so that it's remaining still in your hand, and even if it does cut you, I mean, it's a hand injury compared to taking something very severe. So doing that, and then obviously you can do what you want to try to come in, disarm them, you can strike them while they're not able to defend or attack, all of that kind of stuff. So it looks stupid, but it is actually a viable strategy and has been used historically. There are even some treatises that explicitly show that it's a good idea to do. I'm just saying the same thing, basically. Nah, I didn't riposte in time. You saw that. It was a thrust. It would have been a shallow stab, but it would have done maybe a grazing hit nonetheless. He just needed the guard twisted. He just needed to twist it back in place. Excuse me. It's not a crap sword. They have been quite thoroughly used, so a bit of occasional damage or a little, bit comes out of place. Doesn't matter. No, I was slow on the riposte, so I stopped and thought, there's no point. Yep. You can see, like I said, he is doing a... He puts more of his body in, and hence... I think that might have struck me. Oh, just barely stopped him. Well, I acknowledge hits. I know, I'm the one saying I'm honest. But, yeah, I guess it must have been that it looks like I got hit, but maybe it was an inch out. Dangerous nonetheless. The power in his attacks meant that by my bad structuring, I either just barely got hit or just barely missed, but regardless, it was very dangerous. Bad footwork by me, but it crudely worked. I tried to go over and cut down on his hand. It didn't work. Yeah, cuts to the hands and forearms. A nice cheap way for me to attack and test a defence without having to overcommit and, you know, end up in severe danger myself. Yeah, we both got each other in that close contact. That was more like grappling range. Now he's doing more cuts from the wrist. It might be to try and catch me off guard more. Been in those exchanges trying to pursue a bit more, because I find that sometimes an opponent is kind of, they know what they're doing. Let's say they attack or you attack, and they have a good idea what's going on, and then by the second action, let's say he attacks me, he has a great idea what he's doing, then I parry and riposte. He kind of knows what's coming. And then by the third action, we are really improvising. And then by the fourth and fifth, basically the more the chain kind of continues, the less prepared the opponent is. And eventually, one person's going to run out of ideas, and then you get a hit. It can be dangerous, because obviously you're running out of ideas like they are. But it's something that experienced fighters like to do more, because they kind of have done the drills and the techniques and things and sort of know what they're doing more, especially if they've got good sparring and tournament experience. I'm still a bit weak on the chain, but I am trying my best to improve. That's why I'm trying these pursuing actions. That was not pursuing, that was quitting. One action, two actions. See how many actions this time. One action, two. Nope. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Luckily I got out of there and recovered my form before he riposted. Here it is. First action, he attacks from his dominant side, which is an outside parry for me. You can see a beautiful structure there. Nice little freeze frame. Second action, I think I'm trying to cut the wrist or somewhere. He raises into a kind of some sort of upright parry to defend that. He then attacks again. I'm looking a bit out of guard, you know, recovering a bit slowly. So he tries to take initiative, fair enough. My elbow looks exposed. I actually parry it, outside guard again, and you can clearly see what my intention is. I've spread... What is going on with my legs? I look like I'm doing the splits. I did poor footwork as always, but you can see his right leg is lifted off the floor, so he has to... Go away. He has to set his foot down and then lift his leg, or otherwise move it to then escape. So it's going to take a good while for him to recover and take that left leg away. Hence, whoosh, whack, and in that little moment, outside guard, cut to the leg. He can see that I'm quite exposed. If he bears down on my head quick enough, or my shoulder, I get hit. I kind of trail my body away, point in the other direction, which is not great for structure, and I need to recover quickly afterwards, but it means the only thing that's exposed at this exact moment is my right leg. And then I'm pulling that swiftly out of the way, well, moderately swiftly out of the way, and then I try to recover. It's not very good, but it worked. It's the thing about techniques versus real life. It's not that techniques don't work, it's more like pulling them off. Obviously life is messy and never perfect. Now I'm trying a few more actions. One action, 2, 1, 2, 3. Nope. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. 1, 2. Yeah, I'll show that one more time. In fact, just before we go to that, I will demonstrate what I'm talking about. So, Guard of St. George is... let's take our sword. It's like this, basically. So, it's the kind of thing... It's very obvious what it does. It blocks everything bearing down from above. So, someone's trying to split my skull or come down to my face, shoulders, chest, whatever is coming directly down, even if it's a diagonal angle instead. This is just an easy way, whether I'm using a sabre grip, hammer grip, or whatever. I tend to do a bit of a hammer grip for a bit more sort of power, to sort of resist, like I'm holding an iron bar above my head, and using it as a sort of a thing to defend myself. And then the person bears down, and obviously that's covered. And then immediately afterwards, while I know his sword is stuck here, that means he's basically stuck like this. So you can see almost everywhere is exposed. But it's easy enough to recover from here, somewhere like there, or from here to there, from here to there. So it's easier for him to recover to something. He is up high, so he is closer to other areas up high. Hence why, pattern of habit for this particular exchange, I went again for the legs, because since he was so close to other things happening up high, I thought I don't want to risk just being parried, so I wanted to go in for the kill. Hence why I struck at his legs again. So we have a look here. Guard of St. George. It was a bit of a crude one, but I'm already kind of powering the riposte at the same time to make it faster. Whack. Quickened heart rate is always a good sign of exercise. Double. Let's have a look at that exchange. That was not a great exchange. Why did it go wrong? Okay, so I'm playing with the range. I actually thought I could maybe close in. That's a Guard of St. George or a Hanging Guard. I was thinking I could do almost the same thing twice in a row. He's not dumb enough to fall for the same thing twice in a row. Playing with the range again. Right, I try to go and strike maybe his hand or do a beat. Now I can see he's gone around. He sees an exposed area here. I see an exposed area around here. We both hit each other. He hit my shoulder on the outside. I hit his shoulder on the outside. Yucky exchange. Ugh. Yeah, I even said it. Don't want that to happen again. Double.
Well, if you've just chopped his arm off, he can't fight you anymore.
Again, if I'm putting the sword down, little secret, I'm usually doing that not because I'm posing or think I'm brilliant. It's because I'm resting. I'm tired. Holding a sword up in guard all the time can be fatiguing, even to someone who's used to it. Successful nonetheless. But it's the same concept again. Guard of St. George, cut to the leg. Nah, I was talking about a pair of trousers, not as expensive as a life. Because I'd cut around the trousers rather than... Here's a leg. Aha! Same concept again. My voice was getting a bit high-pitched because I was a bit tired. Here's the moment I'm looking for. Just a little bit back. So he's playing with the bind, so I just went, yeah! Another reason why I sometimes have my hand on my chest. It's the same as having it on my hip, which is the sort of posh, fancy military sabre way of doing things. Normally, if you look at the pictures, I did a video on British military sabre guards, and in the pictures of things like Angelo and Roworth sort of things, you usually see people like this. You know, posing, I've got my... But it's actually, it's sensible stuff, because if you've got your hands forward, this is a target. You shouldn't really be doing this unless you've got something like a pistol you're aiming at someone, or a shield, or a parrying knife, or some other extra item that you're using in combat. Otherwise, it's just a fleshy target ready to bleed out. So instead, you see some people go like this in a kind of a fancy way. That's just, you know, in sport fencing things, this is a legitimate way to keep your arm out of the way and maybe kind of counterbalance yourself. Sometimes you see people doing this, so they've got their hand on their hip while they're doing their actions, but I was doing this, which is just have the hand flat on the chest, so if you were going to strike it, basically you know, you're reaching deep enough, you can just, you've hit me anyway. In fact, maybe better that you cut my hand rather than cut my heart. But from here, it meant that I was easily able to just go from here. I'm going to make sure I don't swipe my wire, but go from here whoosh, out to where his sword was, grab it, cut. And it's the same thing I mentioned earlier. This one is also sharp. As long as I don't slice and I don't chop, I don't get my fingers cut. In fact, actually, I do have a scar. It won't show up on the camera, but I have a scar on my right middle finger. Instead of getting that from a sword that I've been interacting with all this time. Nice one. I actually got it from a tin can. I opened the tin up most of the way. It was a tin of custard. I was helping a church. And it was just left hanging by a lid, by a little lip, after I'd cut it most, you know, all the way around. But it somehow didn't cut the whole thing. So I started peeling it away, tried to pull it off, but I was holding the edge of the now cut open tin.
Is anyone tired yet?
And yeah, I sliced my fingers. I sliced my thumb, my index finger, and my middle finger. Middle finger deeply enough that I got a scar. So there we are. I've taken more deep scars from a tin can than I did from swords. And on that bombshell, I think we shall call it quits. I hope that you enjoyed it. If you have any questions, leave comments. tell me how this format of video is going. I'm being experimental. This is my setup I usually use for live streams. I don't even do many of those. But I thought it'd be good to look at some sparring footage and review it, but not in a live stream, because I'm kind of swapping between, people and the actual sparring footage, and I don't know if someone's caught up sort of halfway through and they don't know what's going on. So yes, that's that. So tell me how it went. Comment the number 57, so somewhere in the comments, so I know you've watched through to the end and are not just one of those people dumping words, not even watch the video and just saying, "Oh, I'm brilliant," or "You're stupid," and doing all of that. So yeah, do that and tell me how it was. Ta-ra for now.